I spent 30 years rewriting the laws of the universe. I proved that space bends, that time stretches, that the energy inside a single atom could level a city. The world called me the greatest mind alive, and then I met a man who made me realize I had understood nothing. His name was Kurt Gödel. His incompleteness theorems remain the most important result in mathematical logic ever proven. And yet, he was quiet. He was thin. He was terrified of almost everything. And he proved something about reality that I could not accept, that I refused to accept, but that no one in nearly 100 years has been able to disprove. Gödel proved that reality is incomplete, that there are facts about the universe that are absolutely undeniably true, but that can never, ever be proven. Not by me, not by any scientist, not by any computer or civilization, no matter how advanced. The truth is there, but it is permanently out of reach, which means that you, right now, are living in a reality that you will never fully understand. Not because you're not smart enough, because reality itself won't let you. And then, as if breaking the foundations of all human knowledge wasn't enough, he opened my equations. The equations I spent my life building, and he found something hidden inside them that I had never seen. He found that time does not exist. I remember the exact moment he told me. We were walking, as we did every single day, from the Institute to my house on Mercer Street. He said it the way he said everything, calmly, precisely, as if he was telling me what he had for breakfast. And I stopped walking, because if Gödel was right, and Gödel was always right, then everything I had built my life on was an illusion. This is that story. Kurt Gödel was born in 1906 in Brno, in what was then Austria-Hungary. Even as a child, his family called him Mr. W. High, because he never stopped asking questions. Not normal questions, questions that made adults uncomfortable. By the time he arrived at the University of Vienna at age 18, he was already attending meetings of the Vienna Circle, the most elite group of philosophers and mathematicians in Europe. Men twice his age, debating the foundations of truth itself. And this quiet, skinny teenager sat in the back and listened. He listened for a few years, and then he destroyed everything they believed in. To understand what Gödel did, you need to understand what mathematicians believed before him. In 1900, the great David Hilbert, probably the most respected mathematician alive at the time, stood before the International Congress of Mathematicians in Paris and presented a list of 23 unsolved problems. But underneath all of them was one fundamental belief, that mathematics was complete, that every true statement could eventually be proven, that every question had an answer. 30 years later, in 1930, Hilbert still believed it. He stood before an audience in Königsberg and declared, "Wir müssen wissen. Wir werden wissen." We must know. We will know. This was not just optimism. This was the foundation of everything. If mathematics is complete and consistent, then reality itself can be fully understood. Every law of physics, every secret of the universe. Given enough time and enough effort, humanity could know everything. And then, in 1931, a 25-year-old Austrian published a paper that proved Hilbert was wrong. Gödel's paper was titled On Formally Undecidable Propositions. It was 26 pages long. Almost no one understood it at first, but what it said was devastating. Let me try to explain it the way Gödel explained it to me during one of our walks. Imagine you have a system of rules like mathematics. These rules let you prove things. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Provable. The square root of 2 is irrational. Provable. Every even number greater than 2 is the sum of 2 primes. Well, we do not know that yet, but Hilbert believed that if it is true, it is provable, eventually. Gödel showed that this is impossible. In any system of rules powerful enough to do basic arithmetic, there will always be statements that are true, but that the system itself cannot prove. Not because we are not smart enough, not because we need better tools, but because it is a fundamental property of reality itself. Truth is bigger than proof. How did he do it? Gödel was incredibly clever. He constructed a mathematical statement that essentially says, this statement cannot be proven. Think about that. If the statement is provable, then it is false, because it says it cannot be proven. But a false statement should not be provable in a consistent system. So the statement must be true. But if it is true, then it really cannot be proven, which means there is a true statement that can never be proven. When I first read Gödel's paper, I felt something I had not felt since I was a young man working on relativity. I felt the ground shift under my feet. You see, relativity showed that space and time are not what they seem. That was difficult for people to accept. But Gödel went further. He showed that logic itself is not what it seems, that the very tool we use to understand reality has a hole in it that can never be patched. Hilbert's dream was dead, and the man who killed it was the quietest person in any room he entered. I met Gödel when he came to Princeton in the early 1940s. Europe was at war and many of us had fled. Gödel barely made it out. He and his wife Adele traveled east through Russia, across the Pacific, and then across America to reach Princeton. It was one of the last possible escape routes from Nazi-occupied Vienna. When he arrived, he was thin, nervous, and deeply suspicious of the world around him. But when he talked about mathematics, his eyes changed. There was a clarity there that I recognized. It was the same clarity I saw in the mirror when I was 26 and working on special relativity. We began walking together. Every day for years, sometimes we talked about mathematics, sometimes about philosophy, sometimes about politics, though Gödel found politics illogical, and that frustrated him enormously. Most people at the Institute treated me with a kind of reverence that made real conversation impossible. They agreed with everything I said. Gödel never did that. He was the only colleague who would look me in the eye and say, "No, Albert, you are wrong, and here is why." He did not do this to be difficult. He did it because to him, an uncorrected error was a kind of violence against truth. I loved him for it, but there was one conversation that I have never forgotten. It happened during a walk in the autumn of 1949. Gödel told me he had been working on something new, something that involved my own equations, the equations of general relativity. And what he had found was impossible. Gödel told me in his quiet, precise way that he had found a new solution to my field equations of general relativity, a solution in which the entire universe rotates. That alone was remarkable, but that was not the impossible part. The impossible part was what this rotating universe allowed. In Gödel's solution, if you traveled far enough and fast enough in a certain direction, you would end in the past. Gödel had used my equations to prove that time travel is mathematically possible. I remember standing still on the path. Gödel kept walking for a few steps before he noticed I had stopped. He turned around with that look he always had, as if he genuinely couldn't understand why anyone would be surprised by a mathematical fact. I told him, "Kurt, this means that time, as we experience it, might not be real." And he said, "Yes, that is what it means." Gödel published this result in 1949 as a contribution to my 70th birthday volume, a birthday present. While other colleagues wrote kind words and gentle tributes, Gödel gave me a mathematical proof that time is an illusion. It was the most Gödel thing he ever did. But here is what I could not say publicly, and what I will tell you now. Something was wrong with Gödel. It had been wrong for a long time, and it was getting worse. He was afraid, not of abstract things. He was afraid of very specific, very concrete things. He was afraid of being poisoned. He was afraid of the cold. He was afraid of gases escaping from his refrigerator. He kept the heating in his office so high that no one else could enter the room. And the food. Gödel became convinced that someone was trying to poison him. Not a vague suspicion, a deep, unshakable certainty. The only food he would eat was food that his wife Adele had prepared and tasted first. Adele. She was not an intellectual. She was a former dancer from a Viennese nightclub, 6 years older than Kurt. The academic world looked down on her, but she was the reason Gödel was alive. She protected him from himself every single day. There is one story I must tell you, because it shows exactly who Gödel was. In 1947, Gödel applied for American citizenship. I agreed to be his witness at the hearing, along with our colleague Oscar Morgenstern. The day before the hearing, Morgenstern told me that Gödel had spent weeks studying the United States Constitution in preparation, and he had found what he called a logical flaw, a way in which the Constitution could legally be used to turn America into a dictatorship. Morgenstern begged me, "Albert, you must make sure he does not bring this up with the judge." At the hearing, the judge made a casual remark. He said, "You come from Austria. That was under a terrible dictatorship. Fortunately, that cannot happen here in America." Gödel's eyes lit up. "Oh, yes," he said. "I can prove it." I put my hand on his arm. The judge, who fortunately had a sense of humor, moved on quickly. Gödel got his citizenship, but he was genuinely confused about why anyone would not want to hear a valid logical proof. I died on April 18, 1955. I was 76 years old, and I want to tell you what I feared most in my final days. It was not death. It was leaving Kurt alone. I knew that without me, without our walks, without the one person who understood what it felt like to see things that others could not see, I knew Kurt would retreat further into his own mind. And I was right. After I was gone, Gödel became more and more isolated. His paranoia deepened. He was convinced that the world was systematically trying to harm him. He barely left his house. He barely spoke to anyone. If colleagues at the institute wanted to talk to him, they had to telephone first, even if they were in the same building. And even then, he often did not answer. And then, in the winter of 1977, Adele was hospitalized. She had a stroke and could not come home for months. Without her to taste his food, Gödel stopped eating. Not suddenly. Gradually. Day by day. Less and less. On January 14, 1978, Kurt Gödel died at Princeton Hospital. He weighed 65 pounds. The cause of death was listed as malnutrition and inanition caused by personality disturbance, starvation. The man who proved that truth is bigger than proof starved to death because he could not trust the world enough to eat. People sometimes ask, was Gödel's madness connected to his discoveries? Did he see something in the structure of reality that broke his mind? I do not know. What I know is this: Gödel proved that every system has limits, that no matter how powerful your logic, there will always be truths that lie beyond your reach. And perhaps his own mind was a proof of that theorem. A system so powerful that it could see truths no one else could see, and yet it could not save itself. And they ask me why I still came to the Institute every day in my final years. They assumed I was still working. I was not. I came for one reason only: the privilege of walking home with Kurt Gödel. Every afternoon, at the same time, on the same path, two old men walked together. One had bent the universe. The other had broken the rules of thought itself. And for a few years, in a small town in New Jersey, that was enough. I am Albert Einstein, and I never walked alone as long as Kurt was alive. Kurt Gödel, 1906 to 1978. His incompleteness theorems remain the most important result in mathematical logic ever proven.